And we are live, guys. Welcome, girls of high value, to another live session. My name is Joseph Darling. What we're going to talk about today is how women, all women, are inherently good. And I'm also going to talk about if men are the same. This is going to be a very interesting podcast. Really, I haven't prepared much, but I've been preparing for years for this. So let's dig deep into it. When you started out in your life, you started out as feminine. You might not remember your earliest childhood memories, but eventually, if you look back, the happy moments of your childhood, okay, so before you went into puberty, we're talking now, 5 to 8, 5 to 9, 5 to 10. Hopefully, if you were in a family that loved you, that took care of you, that preserved you and protected you, those will be fond memories. You will look back and think about the times you ran around, you laughed, you cried, but it was mostly nice, fond memories. You were protected. You were provided for. You didn't have to think about anything. You could be with your friends. You could watch movies or whatever it is that you were doing during that time. And it was wonderful. It was beautiful. And you naturally did good to others. You naturally hugged your mother. You naturally hugged your father. You naturally did everything that was good naturally. But then you entered into puberty eventually. During this time, you now suddenly get a little bit bigger eye-opener for boys. And during this time, you now started to be burdened. Okay? Let me explain to you my definition for masculinity and femininity, because this is quite important at this moment in time. Masculinity for women means that they are burdened, which basically means that responsibility and burden is put upon their shoulders and they have to carry it. And basically what happens then is that masculinity in women, if they're masculine, they're gonna try to be disciplined, try to be responsible, try to do the right thing all the time, and very often it's gonna burden them even more. Okay, so the more masculinity you take on, the more responsibility you take on, the more leadership you take on, the more whatever it is you take on, the more masculine you're going to be. So it's kind of like a continual cycle that actually, in my opinion, is not the right one for women. Simply because of the fact that when you were feminine, before your puberty, you had no worries. You had nothing to think about. Boys were cute, but it wasn't like you needed them. It wasn't like, oh, I really hope that he wants me. It was more like you were just playing. You were just friends. Just life was wonderful. And then now suddenly you get into puberty and now things get tricky. Things get difficult and you're jealous and you're not jealous. And then you get into catfights with your girlfriends and there's just a lot of stuff going on in your teenage years. But not all is bad. Even in your teenage years, you can have wonderful, awesome times, and hopefully those sober times will also be awesome, right? It's not just the times when you're actually out partying and drinking and being with boys. But if you were preserved, protected, and taken care of by a father and a mother who loved you, then hopefully you managed to keep the boys out of your life as long as possible so that you could kind of have fun during their teenage years without the burden of immature boys in your life causing issues and problems and difficult decisions and what should I do and what should I not do, etc. If you've passed your teenage years, you might be looking back thinking, oh man, I did a lot of stupid things and I'm kind of embarrassed now that I did all those things. Oh man, this is horrible. If you are in your teenage years, you might be thinking, I'm not having a bad time. This is wonderful. Okay, so it's different for everyone, right? But some girls during their teenage years become heavily burdened. And actually, in fact, it might be that it started already in your early childhood years that you became burdened from the fact that maybe your parents got divorced or you never had a father, so you always had some form of lack, but your mother was struggling on her own, and it's possibility that you could have developed already some masculine traits in that early childhood that eventually compounded over time in your teenage years and made you even more burdened. Okay, what's the problem with women being burdened or being masculine? Well, the fact of the matter is, if you think about responsibility, it takes you out of the now. It takes you out of your emotion and puts you in your head. So if you're masculine, basically what's going to happen is that you're going to be mostly stuck in the past, or you're going to be stuck in the future. And you're never really going to be ever in the now. And unless you become financially free completely in the future, and you know that your assets are taking care of you and everything's wonderful, you never have to worry about money ever again, that's when you can work on your femininity. That's great. But I wouldn't miss out on my teenage years, my 20s and my 30s, of allowing myself to, if I was a woman, to be feminine. Because what does femininity mean? Feminine means that you are unburdened. Basically means that you don't have to worry about a thing when it comes to big responsibilities, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to having to have good grades, having to get into a college, having to get a job in the future, having to do this, having to do this, having to do that. You don't want that. That's burden. It makes you masculine. Femininity allows you to be with your parents for as long as possible. You have a father that protects you, hopefully, and preserves you, hopefully. And the only burden that you have, really, is the fact that you don't have a man. Okay? That could be an issue, but if your father's protecting you in the right way and you are truly provided for and you have girlfriends that you love and enjoy spending time with all the time, you're going to procrastinate the things with the boys naturally. The only reason why girls start earlier and earlier and earlier to have sexual relationships with boys is because they don't have the father figure, or simply they don't have really good relationships with other girls. Okay? It comes from a lack of other people relationships, which forces the woman, like inherently, from, if we look back from thousands of years, you know, the evolution and the way that the planet has been designed is that women naturally gravitate towards men so that the men can provide for them at an earlier and earlier time. Meaning, she gives sex and then he provides something to her. This is why girls start earlier and earlier and earlier to have sex. It's not good. You know, in the perfect world, women would wait to have sex until they're of age, right? And that would be the best time to start a sexual relationship if you found the right guy. And I emphasize the right guy. Okay, like go through my videos if you don't know what that means. Okay, so if you're feminine, that means you're going to be unburdened, and it allows you, instead of thinking about the things of the world, you can think about relationships and you can think about your health. Those are the only two things that women really should have to think about, because those are things that they actually are interested in to think about. Feminine women, that is. Masculine women, very often they'll be more focused on the money, and they'll be more focused on the things of the world. Feminine women, however, they're more focused on relationships and health, and they want those things to work out. So, all women are inherently good. What does that mean? From my perspective, if women could choose, if all the monetary problems were taken away, zip, you never have to work again, you are free to do as you please. And they were provided for by a man that they loved. Okay? Not just free to sleep around, because the fact that you don't have a man is a burden in itself. Women are monogamous by nature and they want to have one guy. But the problem is that most men suck. And this is why women, once they get in a relationship, they don't really want to be in the relationship, so they want to look somewhere else. And the reason for that is because they're usually masculine. If a masculine woman gets into a relationship, guess what? The partner will probably be feminine, because they're polar opposites. and they attract. Or the man will be masculine, but there's going to be fights and bickering all the time, and the woman's going to look down on him because he wants sex all the time because he's feminine, which will basically force her to want to look elsewhere. Not fun. Because of the masculinity. It's not her fault that she's masculine, it's the guy's fault that he's feminine. Because if he was masculine, then the woman would be allowed to be feminine because she wouldn't have to worry about a thing. Because he's providing, and he's protecting, and he's making sure that you've got all your needs and everything's wonderful. And he has power to give you those things without you having to get those things. Does that make sense? So, point of this is, if everything was taken care of and you had the right guy who loved you unconditionally, you would be free. And you would be free to do good. My belief is that women during this moment in time would not do evil or bad or whatever you want to call it. Women that don't have too many issues don't create a lot of issues. Women are inherently good and they want to be good. They want to serve. They want to help others. They're not inherently selfish. It's the fact that most women these days are masculine that causes selfishness to arise at all. If women were feminine, they have so much to give because they're not burdened. If they're not burdened, good feelings naturally develop in women that causes them to want to share, to want to give, to want to do good, to basically to just give everyone goodness. And what happens with karma if women actually do that? They get more goodness and they get happiness back because they're providing happiness. Does that make sense? Femininity in women, being unburdened, not having to worry about the things of the world, worry about what's going to happen in the future. If you know you're taken care of, you don't have to worry about politics. You don't have to worry about the government. You don't have to worry about all those things other than blaming your man, the right guy, and basically nudging him and encouraging him and rewarding him to think bigger about the world problems so that he can solve them. The right guy will want to solve them because he loves you so much and unconditionally. Does that make sense? So that I've explained now about women being inherently good and how I explain it. It's kind of like you are allowed to return back to your childhood, to your teenage years when everything was hunky-dory wonderful, but you've grown up that you have all of that wonderful feelings of carelessness and being allowed to be free and enjoy yourself. And you have a wonderful sexual relationship with your man of your choice, the right guy. The combination of those as you become an adult is what we should be, encouraging women to get. And if we could have all women just enjoy that, oh man, what a world we would live in, right? Okay, so number 2, are men inherently good? And I would say that's a tougher question. Women I know for sure are inherently good. Men, on the other hand, I would say they're neutral. Let me explain. Women have what we call caring. Okay, women care. Women care a lot. And this is planted in them in such a way that if they are unburdened, okay, so they're feminine, that caring will be used to actually care about other people because you have sufficiency for your needs. You've got everything that you need. So you can't give yourself more. Why would you need more if you've got everything that you need emotionally? If you're feminine, you're in the now and you're just bubbly and just enjoying life. Fantastic. So if you get abundance, your desire then is to share with those you care about. Does that make sense? This is the beauty of women, is that they want to care for others. Naturally. Automatically. If they're feminine and unburdened. If they're masculine, not so much. Because then they're diversified so much that they don't have capacity to care about anyone else accept themselves. I know, that sucks. And that's what's happening in the world today. The more masculine, the more career driven, the more leadership women take upon themselves, the less capability they have to care about people, and they end up just caring about themselves instead. Problematic. However, with men, they don't have the caring gene or whatever you want to call it. They don't care. This is why boys just simply can live in a nasty, stinky house and not do squat about it. Because they can live in their filth. Because they don't care. Like, eventually, once they taste the beauty of cleanliness, then they maybe eventually will care. You know what I mean? But guys who have not been growing up with beauty and with cleanliness and taking care of others, they're just not gonna care. Boys are neutral. They're not bad. They're not good. They're neutral. However, as they grow up, they're being taught different things by society, by their parents, by other boys, by other men, whatever, okay? And the only thing that they care about eventually is women. Beautiful women. And they're going to want to impress those beautiful women. Now, let's look at this. If they want to impress beautiful women, this is like ingrained in men, okay? We want to impress beautiful women. Which means, if those beautiful women are masculine and care mostly only about themselves and got a lot of problems, a lot of issues, the man who cares about those women, he will be more lenient to do bad. Okay? It's not the woman's fault. It's the boy's fault for not taking his responsibility upon himself to actually learn how the world works, and it's also maybe his father's fault for not training him properly in the ways of the world. I mean, mothers have a hard time teaching boys because mothers don't know how boys think. So mothers, single mothers, teach boys very often the same thing that they teach to girls. That's a big problem because they're completely different. Men do not care, and they're only caring about sexual access and beautiful women. Very often, and leadership, okay? They want leadership as well, but very often that comes from having beautiful women. So it's a very big focus for guys. At least heterosexual guys. So, what does this mean? When women are feminine and unburdened, men will be desirous to impress those women by doing good. Okay, does that make sense? Which means that they can learn what goodness is, but they could also turn bad by not caring. So it's kind of like a two-edged sword. And men have 10 to 20 times more testosterone than women, which means that they're going to be motivated, massively motivated, to go obsessively in one of each direction. They're not going to have motivation to get girls at all because they're not confident and they haven't learned anything about what it takes. But the guys who know how to get girls and who have the confidence to get them, they've got the motivation and the testosterone to do it, they'll either be bad in terms of having masses amounts of different sexual partners and not care. You remember that one? They're not going to care because they don't care. They'd rather just have sexual access and just do whatever they want because it's great and there's not much repercussions. Unless the woman then, gets pregnant or she accuses him of something maybe he has done or hasn't done and we'll never know. Do you understand? It becomes very problematic when women are masculine and men are feminine, emotionally unstable, and need sex all the time. Because they're just going to get a bunch of harems and have tons of women and never develop any depth of relationship with any of them. What a waste. And they're not interested in creating a family because commitment would take away all of the nice experiences they're having with all the hundreds of women that they're having sex with. Exactly. We don't want men to be bad. We don't want men to not care. We don't want men to be emotionally unstable. My definition for masculinity and femininity when it comes to men in general is masculinity in men is to have full control over one's emotions and understand goodness in that relationship as well, which means that if they do good and they use their they have full control of their emotions, they do good, then good will come back to them. That's just the natural law. And if they do bad, then bad will come back to them. But very often, a lot of guys are feminine, and femininity is that there is no control. They don't have control over their emotions. So they're emotionally unstable, which means that they need sex a lot. They don't have control over that emotion. And if they don't get sex, then they just masturbate and watch porn. Okay, the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing, or because doing nothing is basically doing what those guys are doing. Either watching porn and masturbating because they can't get any girls, or they're bad in terms of they can get any girl that they want and they sleep around as much as they want and they burden women, making them masculine. Because you get the point. If you don't get the point, comment down below, ask questions. I want to share. And the second of all, good men are masculine men who actually do good because they know good things will come back to them, and they're emotionally stable so they can actually get feminine women. These are the guys who actually produce long-term families with beautiful next generations, and that take responsibility upon their shoulders and do everything in terms of the finances and protecting the home and building a beautiful nucleus family. This is what we want, guys. So guys are neutral. They can turn bad, they can turn good. It depends on their upbringing. And very often it depends on what's happening in society and what they're being taught, really. Because if they're being taught to be good, they'll figure it out that is the best way to go. However, women are inherently good, and they only turn bad if boys or men burden them. Either from in sense of their father not being present and protecting and helping the family and making sure that his daughters were protected, or it could be in terms of the men having sex with her or leaving her, or entering those relationships with her and she's not really interested, and then she lets go of them as well and increases her sexual partner count. So anyway, there's a lot of information that I shared in this video. I'm going to try and go detailed into this in other videos in the future. So if you like this, if it made some sense, and even if you didn't like it, make sure you comment down below, like or dislike this video, and I'll see you again tomorrow.